everyone, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to a Books Beside My Bed video. If you are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and if you're very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading wrap up for the Love in the Night Readathon. It was so much fun. I was helping to co-host this. I got to participate in 2 live shows. One was a read-in, which I will leave linked down below, and that was on Izzy's channel. I also got to participate in the live show wrap-up where we talked about our group book. All of those recordings will be linked down below on various channels, and I'm also going to leave the links to all of the hosts because they are wonderful, wonderful people. This was a paranormal romance readathon and it was utterly delightful. I should also jump in and say that this is my 150th episode of Books Beside My Bed, which is just mind-boggling to me. I can't believe I've been doing weekly wrap-ups for that long. It is still one of my favorite videos to film every week. Alright, this was my reading week from the 8th until the 14th of November. I read a total of 9 books, some novels, some novellas. I read a total of 1,964 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 359 books. The first book that I read this week was Waking the Dragon, which is book 1 in the Veil of the Stars series by Juliet Cross. It was published in 2016 and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read this for the prompt to read a book with a different style, mostly because I don't traditionally read dragon, urban fantasy, paranormal romance books. Turns out this is actually a spin-off series. I didn't realize that when I picked it up, but you can totally read it without having read the other series. I managed just fine. There is a little bit of the world building that you sort of have to pay attention to at the start because we are experiencing a world that has both humans and also these dragon-human hybrid characters called Morgans. At the very beginning of the story, we discover that 3 human women have been killed in Morgan territory, and these murders prompt an ambitious young reporter, Moira Cade, into investigating what has happened, and she ends up partnering up with Cal Moonring, who is the captain of the Morgan Guard, to investigate the Morgan underworld, which is quite dangerous for humans. I enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. It was nice to read something else by Juliet Cross. I'd previously only read her Wolf Gone Wild / Don't Hex and Drive books, where those were sort of almost paranormal romance rom-coms. This was definitely very paranormal urban fantasy based, and it was delightful. Then I read Awakened by Moni Boyce. This is the first book in the Oracle Chronicles. It was originally published in 2018, and I only gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. I had a really hard time reading this. I did read it for the challenge to read a book by an author of colour, and I'm so glad that I did read it, and I would probably try some of Moni Boyce's other works just to see if this was a one-off with the story. It is about Willow Stevens, who has been haunted by these sinister dreams with a man telling her he's coming after her in her dreams. One day while she's at work, she collapses and she wakes up in the apartment of her co-worker Elias Walker, where he reveals that she is actually an oracle and he is part of a witch guard to protect her. And then it's a bit of a road trip to find answers, and I think that's probably where the story fell apart for me. It just felt very lockstep. I think it was a really interesting concept. I don't know if the execution was for me. Then I read This Time Tomorrow by Tessa Bailey. This is the second book in the Phenomenal Fates series. It was published in 2020. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I read it for the challenge to read a vampire book. This is the story of Roxana, who is the heiress to the Vampire Slayer throne. Her mother is currently in charge and has tasked Roxana with killing the vampire Elias, who she has a past with, and so far Roxana has not been able to do that. She returns home expecting to be punished by her mother, but she ends up with a brief reprieve and is tasked again with killing Elias. What we discover is that the 2 of them have a past. They had one night where they crossed paths in Las Vegas before Elias was turned, and he doesn't remember any of it. At least that's what Roxana believes. It turns out that Elias does remember, and he is letting Roxana believe that he doesn't in order so that she can do her job because he hurt her quite badly. And we find this out through a series of flashbacks in the story. And I really enjoyed this. It was just fun. I also read Heart of Fire by Beck McMasters. This is the first book in the Legends of the Storm series. It was published in 2017. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. I read this for the challenge to read a shifter novel. This is one that features dragons. I really, really enjoy this. I also didn't realize that Beck McMasters was Australian, so that was a nice surprise. This is the story of Freya, who lives with her father, who is quite sick, and she has grown up hearing the stories of how The Dreki, or dragons, live in Iceland's volcanoes. This is sort of historical fiction. It doesn't feel like it's set in contemporary times, but it's definitely set in Iceland. And the stories also tell Freya that the dragons like to steal maidens away. She doesn't really believe any of this. She knows that the Dreki are real because there is one that is haunting her town. However, the final straw for Freya is when said dragon comes and steals the last ram that she has, which was the only hope she had of continuing to feed herself and her father through the winter. So she marches up to the dragon's lair and confronts him about it, berates him for stealing her ram, and then leaves. The dragon's name is Rurik, and he is enchanted by this fiery woman who's come into his cave telling him off. And it turns out that the most powerful of the Dreki have the ability to shift into human form. And so he does that and spends a little bit of time with her. She doesn't realize it at the time, although he also utterly infuriates her in human form as well. The story goes from there, and we discover that Rurik is actually nobility or royalty in the Dreki world, and he has been exiled. And so there is some conflict that comes along there. And we also discover that perhaps Freya is not just an ordinary human either. It was so much fun. I could not put this book down. I also believe Smart Women Read Romance recently did a podcast episode on this book, so it's definitely worth checking out if you want a more in-depth review of the actual book. The next book that I read was the group book pick, and that was Barista and the Bear by Rebel Carter. This is the first book in the Oak Fast Fated Mates series. It is a 2020 release. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was really cute. It is the story of Teresa, who works in a little coffee shop called the Barista Witch, and she's living her life, but that's all upended when Cash Strongheart walks into her coffee shop and declares her to be his fated mate. And we discover that bear shifters can be really, really persistent, and also that maybe Teresa is not just an ordinary human, and that there is a reason why this fated mate's bond is so strong between the two of them. There were some moments that I had some questions around, particularly when he basically kidnaps her and her best friend just goes along with it. It is funny in the scene, but also part of me is just like, okay, this is a thing. And I know it's very much a thing in the paranormal romance world. But sometimes when it comes up, I take a moment to have to think about it. But that said, aside from being rather pushy about trying to get a hold of his mate, Cash is quite a sweetheart. The next two books that I read were super short. The first one doesn't really count for any prompts. It's sort of just a bonus one, and that was Totally Spooked by Zoe Indiana. This is the first book in the Shifter Speed Dating series. It is a 2020 release. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It is really centered around this blindfolded speed dating service for shifters, and in this series you get totally wacky shifters. So this one was a fruit bat shifter. So Felix has come home and he hears about this event, and he goes in the hope of finding his fated mate, who actually turns out to be a human. But it turns out in this world that shifters mating to humans is not really the done thing, and so the powers that be try and shut this whole thing down. So then I read the sequel to Totally Spooked, which is called Totally Basted. 2020 release, 3 out of 5 stars. This one completed this read a sequel challenge on my bingo board, and it's about Coop and Hattie, and Coop is a turkey shifter. So this is a Thanksgiving romance, and I think the highlight for me was the conversation between Coop and Hattie about what do turkey shifters eat for Thanksgiving dinner, which that had me laughing out loud. There's not a huge amount to talk about in this particular series because they are so short. I think most of them are under 60 pages, and I believe there is a Christmas one coming out, so I'll probably continue that because honestly they were just fun, quick, easy reads. The next book I read was First Grave on the Right by Dorinda Jones. This is the first book in the Charlie Davidson series. It was originally published in 2011. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I read it for the host favorite. We open with Charlie Davidson, who is a grim reaper, and she's been haunted in her dreams by this mysterious man made of smoke. This is a little bit unsettling to her because she can't work out who it is. Then she is quickly drawn into the investigation of the death of 3 lawyers from the same law firm. She works as a private investigator working as a consultant for her uncle, who is a police detective, and she can see and hear these 3 lawyers who are trying to find out what exactly resulted in their deaths. And as that storyline goes on, she becomes increasingly concerned by the fact that this mysterious smoke man is starting to appear to her, not just in her dreams, and also that she may actually know who it is. So you sort of have 2 parallel investigations happening. I enjoyed it. I liked the humor. I liked how Charlie is very much just, this is what I'm going to do. And I think she has like a near-death experience in pretty much every chapter of the book. I'm a little bit concerned about the smoke person because I think there's some dubious consent issues going on there. But again, paranormal romance, and this was pretty typical, I think, for a romances around 2010, 2011. So I put it into context of that and go, okay, I can see why that was a thing, but it did sort of fit in with the storyline. And then finally, I read Wolfsong by TJ Klune. This is the first book in the Green Creek series. It is a 2016 release that I gave 5 out of 5 stars, and I read it for 2 prompts: the LGBTQIA plus square plus the booktube darling square. It is the story of Ox, who has grown up his entire life believing the words that his father told him, that he would amount to nothing and that no one would really ever see him for who he is. His father left when Ox was quite young, and he was raised by his mother, who he absolutely adores. When Ox is 16, he meets a young boy, Joe, on the way home, and Joe and his family have just recently moved back to Green Creek. When he comes across Joe, Joe just starts talking and talking at him. He's a 10-year-old boy, and he just cannot stop asking questions of Ox. When Ox is taken back to meet Joe's family, they tell him that Joe has not spoken for over a year, that something traumatic happened to him and he just shut down, and Ox is the first person he's spoken to. They develop this really strong connection and strong friendship, and over the years that becomes potentially something more. If anyone's concerned about age of consent, nothing happens until everyone is of an age of consent. So this is a story that really takes place from the time when Ox is quite young all the way up until he's 23. At 17 years of age, Ox discovers Joe and his family's secret. And then at 23, there is a murder that occurs in the town and changes the dynamic between him and his friends and packmates. I don't really want to say more than that because I think this is a story that you have to read. TJ Klune has a very lyrical writing style. It's very different and it will not be for everyone. It does feature werewolf shifters. There is a really interesting lore built around them, and it's really quite compelling. I know the one question a lot of people want to know is, did I cry? I didn't cry. I got emotional, but I didn't cry because it takes a lot for books to make me cry. Sorry. I did love the story. I really want to read the other 3 books in the series because I think they're going to be great. So those are all the books that I read during the Love in the Night readathon. I had so much fun and I did push myself to read a whole lot of books this week. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read as many books in the coming weeks, but we will see how I go. But it was just utterly delightful, and I was so privileged to co-host with such amazing people. So I will leave a link to all the live show recordings down below so that you can check them out. Links to all the books will be down below. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books, if you're planning on reading them, or alternatively, feel free to share something that you have been reading in the last week that has made you happy. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are doing well and staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye.